16. Quentin yawned, propped up against the wall. Hours had passed since they'd reached the upper ring. Sunlight crept over the horizon, casting the lavish buildings in orange. Everything on the inner ring, from the filigreed gold that cornered each building to the immaculate whiteness of the limestone streets, left a bitter tang in Cal's mouth. He imagined the painstaking effort it must take to keep this district pristine. Nobles squandered their gift on whatever pointless aim they could think of, but they would never stoop so low as to use it for cleaning. No, that drudgery fell to the Hollowborn. Indentured servant was the term floated by the elite, a fancy word for slave. The maelstrom's roar was constant here, so close to Eundis's citadel. Jord had claimed the denizens of the inner ring liked the noise, a reminder of their status. Only those fortunate enough could be subjected to the never-ending clash and whirl of water. The citadel loomed in the near distance. Even after all these years, Cal had never gotten a good look at the structure. Never had a reason to. The structure mirrored Igni's citadel, towering, light-swallowing walls of gray, straddling the enormous chain that speared into the violent waters below. 3 tramways connected it to the inner ring. The western tram, nearest to Cal and Quentin, ferried the social elite to galas. The southern and eastern ones hauled supplies and guards. The skin around Cal's chain scars twitched as he stared at the chain. He wrenched his gaze away with a grunt. Ugh, they should be here by now. Calm, my friend. Quentin yawned again. I have every confidence our friends are dandy and on their way. Jord knows what he's doing. And Shay. Oh, what a woman. A better mix of beauty and fury I've never seen. What I wouldn't give for some shadow time with her. Cal rolled his eyes. Aren't you meant to be with Jord? Quentin chuckled. Never hurts to keep one's options open. An eye on the market, so to speak. He winked. Cal's lip curled. Why are you so concerned? Got eyes on Jord, have you? Quentin prodded. No. Figures. From what he told me, the two of you used to be the fiercest of enemies in your younger days. Quentin leaped to his feet and sidled closer than Cal would have preferred. That was a long time ago. Cal shoved him back. Things change. People change. Sounds like quite the tale. Willing to share? No. Oh, please. We've no idea how long it will take the others to get here. How about a trade? You tell your experiences with Jord, and I'll tell you mine, Quentin said, cocking his eyebrows suggestively. Not interested. Quentin threw up his hands. Fine, I'll just have to make it up myself. He paced, finger tapping his chin. Once upon a time, there was a hollow-born boy named Cal. Friendless, familyless, and oh so bitter. Cal did his best to ignore Quentin, something that proved impossible given Quentin's proximity. Now, here comes the hero of our tale, the dashing, the daring, the dangerously handsome Jord Tull. Quentin flourished like a street performer. Cal shifted, his jaw tightening. Now Jord, as kind as he was brave, took pity on lowly Cal and his orphan ilk. Cal jerked his head toward Quentin. His attention was now fully fixed on the would-be bard. Our hero extended a hand in generosity toward Cal, but he, of ill mind and iller temper, swatted that hand away. For you see, Cal and the members of his ghastly orphanage supped on only bile and contempt for their betters. Jealous they were of the. Cal snapped. He lunged at Quentin and slammed him into the wall, fingers crushing his throat. Quentin's smirk didn't waver. What's the matter, King Hullo? Quentin spluttered. Did I hit a nerve? Cal hurled him to the ground. Cal! George's voice rang down the alleyway. What are you doing? Coughing, Quentin allowed George to help him to his feet. He placed a hand on George's chest while his other rubbed his throat. It's nothing, George. Don't worry. Cal and I were just getting to know one another better. The man behind the legend. This was just a little misunderstanding. Isn't that right, Cal? George turned an angry gaze toward Cal, waiting for his response. Right, snorted Cal. He focused his attention to Shay, ignoring the heat in his chest. Find anything? Shay eyed Quentin before answering. Nothing much. All we learned was that the Citadel is holding a sort of gala in a few days. A gala? Quentin quipped. In honor of what? Or whom? Who cares? Shay replied. Probably some snob who won the Best Little Follower award. Either way, not our target. What about you two? Cal's tongue stuck to his dry mouth. His heat flickered, lighter now. Cal here was able to abscond with a key to Lord Utikin's estate, Quentin supplied. Cal, that's perfect. Where did you find it? Shay asked. Cal looked down, avoiding Shay's gaze. She took his chin in her hands and raised it. What's wrong? Took it from a hospice in the swell. A hospice run by Prissa. He forced himself to meet her eyes. Wait, Prissa? The little girl from Leif's orphanage? Shay asked, her eyes wide and searching Cal's. Cal, are you okay? A note attached to the key said this opens a back door. Prissa used it to come and go as she pleased. He tore his gaze away from Shay. Looking at her right now was too dangerous. She would see right through him. Jord cut in. Well, that solves one problem, but we still don't know where to plant the evidence. Isn't it obvious? Quentin said. We plant it in his personal chambers. Where else hides a man's deepest, darkest? Good point, Jord replied. We don't have much time left. The sun will be up in less than an hour. He took the fake documents out of his jacket and handed them to Shay. Do you think you can create an illusion for all four of us? Make us look like serving staff would suffice. Shay took the documents and flexed her branded hand. Four? No. But I can manage two of us. She turned toward Cal and nodded. Cal took a second, but he nodded back in agreement. Fine. Cal, you go with Shay. Watch her back, George said, his voice still carrying his annoyance. And no killing. Understand? Cal didn't like the tone, but he nodded anyway. Excellent. And while they are busy uprooting the life of one of the city's finest, I shall go and inform the prefects. Quentin adjusted his neckline. Shouldn't be too difficult to convince him of Lord Utikin's rebel treachery. He winked at Cal again and set off before anyone could say anything to him. Good luck, you two, George said as Shay began casting her illusion over herself and Cal. I'll be here if you need me. Cal looked down at his new clothing. Shay's gift had conjured simple servants' clothing for them both, drab grays that leached both life and importance out of whoever wore them. He took one last look at the mansion ahead of him and then followed Shay into the shadows. Cal and Shay moved in unison, hoisting each other over the courtyard's outer wall. Years of sparring and running missions together had honed their teamwork, though for Cal, the rebellion was just a means to an end. Each successful mission brought him closer to killing the Lord Inquisitor. He'd cut through anyone, deal with any pain, bear any burden, as long as it meant reaching his goal. At least, that's what he told himself. His arm jerked as Shay pulled him behind one of the many garden hedges that ran across the courtyard. Her eyes searched his, urgency and concern warring in her gaze. Focus, she whispered. I know seeing Prissa again rattled you, but now is not the time for distractions. You can daydream later. Not daydreaming, Cal replied curtly. I'm fine. You trying to convince me or yourself? Cal clenched his jaw. Instead of answering, he studied the manor's lit windows, the occasional shadow passing behind drawn curtains. You're going to have to open up to someone eventually. You know that, right? Shay pressed, still keeping her voice to a whisper. Her words hit harder than he expected. They weren't just the perfect team. There was more to their relationship. They'd both had to do things they weren't proud of. There was a connection there, one that he'd tried to push away. Shay knew him better than anyone else at this point, and he knew her too. Like you said, this isn't the time, Cal muttered. Right now, all that matters is your rebellion living another day. Your rebellion, Shay echoed. That's what you always call it. The green hedge rustled as she leaned into it. Why have you stuck with us all this time, Cal? Why risk your neck for something you try so hard not to be a part of? Can we talk about this later? He scanned the visible entry points for the best approach. What happened to not being distracted? Shay exhaled, adjusting herself. Fine. We'll continue this later. I'm sure we will, Cal said, more to himself than to her. A door to the estate cellar swung open. A young woman wearing the same drab gray rags as Shay's illusion stumbled out, landing hard on the courtyard's gravel pathways. How many times have I told you not to go upstairs? An older woman loomed in the cellar doorway. Her stark white apron and sleeves rolled up to her elbows, the only thing separating her outfit from the young woman's. The lines in her brow told the story of a woman who'd long since abandoned any sort of motherly feelings. You've no business up there. I swear to the chains, I've had it up to here with you, Hollowborn. Sorry, madam, the young woman squeaked. I was just. You were just snooping around, is what you were doing. The master's chambers are not for your kind. Yes, Mistress Mara. The young woman hung her head, her shoulders slumped forward. Latrines, now. And if I catch you or any of your dirty friends near those stairs again. Cal swallowed against a dry throat, reminded of another matron he'd once known whose bark was often scarier than her bite. The young woman scurried off into the gardens, likely to shed a few precious tears before returning to her grueling duties. Shay nudged Cal, flicking her chin toward the still open cellar door. With a quick jerk of her wrist, Shay's brand pulsed to life. Muted shadows danced along her arm and then across her body. They made staring directly at her difficult. Not impossible, as Cal knew where she was, but it was as if his brain wanted to trick him, tell him he wasn't staring at anything. Shay extended her arm, and similar shadows leaped to Cal, covering him just the same. He hated the feeling. Being encased in gift shadow felt like cheating. They slipped into the cellar, keeping low to the ground. The sharp, acrid smell of wine irritated Cal's nostrils. Rows of barrels stacked crisscrossed lined the walls, with patches of purple and reddish pink seeping into the stone beneath them. He shook his head against the heady scent, focusing on the stairs ahead. Cal grabbed Shay's hand and made his way through the space. Guards roamed the halls, yawning. Morning light had started to bleed through the windows, spreading across the manor's immaculately glossed wooden flooring. Shay's illusion would help them move through the interior's decreasing shadows, but it wouldn't be much use in direct sunlight. Cal waited as two guards stopped directly in front of a stairwell leading up. They grumbled about the long, boring hours they'd been on shift and inquired about each other's family life. Cal looked around at the other corridors, trying to discern some other infiltration path, but he couldn't. Each corridor looked the same to him. Paintings of women, fruit, ships, and all manner of pointless objects hung on wood panel walls. Vanity cabinets filled with trinkets, bookshelves lined with ornaments that glinted with the growing morning light, and expensive waist-high vases that decorated either side. Cal gritted his teeth. There was no time for another approach. This was the path. "They're in the way," he whispered. "Ideas?" Shay braced against the opposite wall, sweat beading her brow. Her brand flared again. Neither of the guards panicked as darkness crept over their eyes. Cal shuddered, remembering a time he'd been curious enough to ask Shay to use the same illusion on him. She'd illusioned Cal's scarred arm to be healed. Everything had remained the same, but it had seemed so real to him at the time. Not just how his arm looked, but how it felt. How he had felt. Shay had tried, in her own way, to give him a moment of peace, but it hadn't ended well. Even now, shame at how he'd reacted crept through him, a memory he'd sooner try to forget. The guards continued their conversation, oblivious. Cal crept past Shay close behind. At the top, she gasped, bracing against the wall. "Drop the shadows," Cal whispered. "The disguises are enough from here." "I'm good," she said after a few seconds. "Just need to catch my breath." Cal put his own hand on her shoulder, felt her tremble as she breathed. "We can move without them. But keep the servant disguise. We don't need shadows as well. It's too much." Cal didn't like the idea of being spotted, even while wearing servant's clothes, but he liked the idea of their disguises dropping unexpectedly even less. "We'll be fine," he said, sounding confident. "We got this." Shay nodded and closed her eyes for a second. She breathed a sigh of relief as the shadow around her dropped, the blur of her outline disappearing. "Better?" Cal asked. "Much," Shay said curtly, walking her hand up the wall as she stood. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Finding the master bedroom would be the next challenge. Even after his years of friendship with Jord, Cal had spent little time in buildings such as this. He preferred to avoid them if he could. They reminded him too much of what he'd grown up without, and how bad it had felt to lose it all, despite it being nothing in comparison to someone who lived like this. He fought the urge to sneak as he and Shay wandered the halls inside the manor, as feigning a servant's humility would get them further. He dipped his head as he passed a guard. "Oi, you there!" The guard called out, "Didn't know your kind were allowed up here." His accent was thick, probably low-born himself. The glowing brand on his hand told Cal everything he needed to know about how loyal to the system this man was. Uh, we're not usually, Shay stammered, adopting her own accent and meek posture. Mistress Mara sent us to tend to Master Utikin's chambers, but we're lost, sir. The guard eyed Shay for a second, passing his discerning gaze over to Cal. He resisted the urge to throw a punch, to knock the guard out and make a break for it. Doing so wouldn't help. This was Shay's domain. Performance was her thing. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut and follow along. The guard sighed, the stiffness in his posture slackening. "I understand," he said, his tone surprisingly gentler than a few seconds earlier. "Lord Huracan is a busy man. It wouldn't do for a man of his station to worry about garments for the upcoming gala. This way." He spun on the spot and walked in the opposite direction. Shay winked at Cal and followed the guard. "In here." The guard stopped outside a plain-looking door. Plain being the only word to describe an intricately inlaid wooden door that sat in a corridor of equal lavishness. "Do what you need to do and then get back downstairs. No loitering, all right?" The guard didn't wait for a response. He turned on his heel and walked away. Shay entered first. She kept her back straight, but not too straight. She was supposed to be playing a serving girl, after all. "Hello? Lord Utikin, sir?" she called out, loud enough for her voice to fill the room and the adjoining one beyond. When one responded to Shay's call, she breathed a small sigh of relief. Cal scanned the room for anything that might look like it contained secret or personal items. It was the first time he and Shay had been on a mission like this. Normally, they'd be here to steal something or do something that would make other members of the rebellion pause. That was the real difference between Cal and other people. He was willing to make the hard choices, do things that would keep others up at night. People wanted freedom, but they wanted it for free. They weren't always willing to do the dirty work. People always. "Cal!" Shay seethed. Cal snapped out of his daydream, admonishing himself for letting his mind wander again. "The door!" Shay grabbed Cal and pulled him into the adjoining room just as the chamber door opened. The tips of his fingers tingling as they slipped under the bed, the thump of his heart echoing in his ears. He'd gotten distracted twice now. Confident footsteps walked directly into the adjoining bedroom. A pair of well-worn boots of fine leather, specked with dust and dirt, stopped directly in front of where Cal hid. His body trembled with nervous anticipation. The boots turned and the mattress above him sagged. A long sigh of frustration filled the space, the sigh of a man exhausted from whatever burden he bore. Another figure appeared in the doorway, along with the hemline of a dress and apron similar to that of the elderly maid Cal and Shay had seen berating the young Hollowborn girl. "How long will you be staying, my lord?" Miss Mara asked. "Not long," a tired voice replied. "I'm here for a change of clothing, and that's it. My holdings in Valewind have come under scrutiny. No doubt another one of the Select Council's means of tarnishing my reputation. I shall be gone from the city for some time. Can I trust my estate to your care?" "Of course, my lord." The elderly maid dipped with a slight curtsy and turned to leave the room. "Ah, Miss Mara, one more thing. Has there been any word, any change in his behavior?" It took Miss Mara a few seconds to answer, her dress swaying from side to side as she shifted in the spot. "I'm afraid not." "I see. To think a mind as sharp as his would become so." Lord Utikin sighed again, the bed frame sagging a little lower. Rissa will be disappointed. You do all you can, my lord. Thank you, Miss Mara. It's just a shame it's not enough. Lord Udican stood, the bed frame creaking as it returned to its normal state. Send supplies to our colleagues in Igni. Make sure he's well taken care of. Of course, my lord. Miss Mara curtsied once more and made her way out of the room. Cal clenched his teeth, pushing away his curiosity, refused to let himself get distracted a third time. Papers shuffled as Lord Udican searched for something at his desk. He muttered to himself and left the room, sighing as he did. Cal and Shay scooched their way out from under the bed and crept toward the open desk drawer. It was as good a place as any to plant the false evidence. Cal handed the documents to Shay and turned toward the doorway, watching for any sign of movement, any shifting shadow in the next room, his palms sweaty. Shay gasped from behind him. As Cal turned, she stuffed what looked like two documents into her jacket. What are they? Cal asked, keeping his voice to a whisper. Later, Shay answered back. Are we clear? Cal held her gaze for a moment, unease washing over him. He turned back to the doorway and poked his head out just enough to get a full view of a now empty room. He's gone, Cal whispered. Let's move. Right. Step by tentative step, they moved through the hallway, trying to gauge distance from the voices heard throughout the estate. Sunlight beamed through the windows in the hallway, the morning starting in full. How are you holding up? Cal asked. What? I'm fine, Shay replied, clearly surprised that Cal was asking. Think you can hold these disguises for a little longer? Of course. Indignation played across her face as she responded. Just follow me, and no more daydreaming. Cal ignored the comment. His question had wounded Shay's pride, and biting back when she felt cornered was very much her style. What's on those documents? Why did you take them? He asked again. Now is not the right time, she replied. Shay froze, staring right ahead. Cal followed her gaze, his pulse spiking as Miss Mara turned the corner at the end of the hallway. He grabbed Shay's arm and pulled her into the nearest room, grateful the door gave way. Who's there? Miss Mara called out as Cal shut the door. Come out right now. Lord Udican will have your hide if I find you snooping. Cal's hand flew to his jagged blade. Shay grabbed his wrist, her fingers digging into his chain scar. No killing, remember? Then what do we do? He hissed back. His skin prickled with heat, not just from his reflex for violence, but that a stiff-backed matron could rattle him so much. Shay locked eyes with him. Kiss me. What? Cal replied. No! Are you insane? Shay yanked him in. He resisted at first, but soon found himself leaning into soft lips and a familiar scent. Not her floral perfume, just her. His resolve wavered, and for a heartbeat, the mission vanished. The door to the guest room crashed open. What in the bleeding pits do you think you two are doing? Miss Mara's shriek tore them apart. Sorry, Miss Mara. Shay ducked her head, jabbing Cal in the side. Yeah, sorry, he muttered, mimicking Shay and avoiding the matron's flame-red face. I ought to have you both thrown out into the street. Get out of here, both of you. Shay dragged Cal past a seething Miss Mara. The taste of her, salt and forgotten warmth, lingered on his lips. He'd been the one to end things between them, and yet his chest ached for the comfort they'd once provided each other. Shay had been lonely, and if that kiss was any indication, then that loneliness hadn't changed. But she didn't want him, just someone to stitch that loneliness shut. And him? The closer they'd gotten, the clearer it had become. He was undeserving. A liar. A thief. A killer. He'd failed everyone who'd ever shown him love. Shay deserved someone far better. Shay dropped her illusion as they rejoined Jord. Her shoulders sagged and her brand flickered out, the strain of constant channeling leaving her. Cal caught her arm as she stumbled, steadying her until she waved him off. At the alley's mouth, Jord leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His fingers drummed against his bicep, gaze darting back and forth up the street. Quentin was nowhere in sight. "He's not back?" Cal asked, scanning the empty alley.
Does it look like it?
Jord snapped, sighing just as suddenly, his annoyance giving way to guilt.
Sorry. It should be taking him this long.
"He probably just got distracted by something pretty," Shay said, patting Jord's shoulder as she passed.
Let's hope so.
Jord rubbed his temples.
How'd it go on your end? Any complications?
"None," Shay replied, staring straight ahead and not at Cal.
Good, good. We'll head back to Dredge as soon as Quentin.
"Are my ears burning?" Quentin's voice rang through the alley as he swaggered into view, arms spread wide in triumph. "Or is someone gorgeous saying my name?" He grinned. "Apologies for the delay. Our ever vigilant prefects required extra persuasion."
Glad you're back,
George said, calm on the surface, but his tapping fingers betrayed him.
Did they take the bait?
"Of course," Quentin winked. "Now all that's left is for that ghastly piece of paper to be found. Assuming you two succeeded?" He directed the comment toward Cal, but it was Shay who answered. "We did." "Excellent." Neither Quentin's smile nor gaze wavered. "Like a match made in mischievous heaven, huh?" "Quentin," Shay interjected. "Hmm? Shut up." The words were clipped with frustration and aimed, Cal suspected, at him. Quentin raised his hands in mock surrender, his expression equally performative, though not before giving Cal a sly wink. "We'd better get moving," Shay continued, eyeing the street. "Getting back to Dredge's hideout won't be easy. Not with morning patrols." "Call me optimistic, but I do not believe random prefect patrols are going to be much of a problem." Quentin's smirk widened as he pointed toward Utican's estate. As if on cue, a band of 6 prefects, their blue-silver armor reflecting the morning light, marched in the estate's courtyard, shoving servants, both gray-clad and finely dressed, to the ground. Their captain hammered on the front door, bellowing for Lord Utican. "That, I believe, is our cue to leave," Quentin said.
Agreed.
Cal's gut twisted as the prefects forced their way inside. He cast one last look at the estate before following the others into the shadows of the alley.